I'm going to talk about my coastal community, my coastal region, which is the northwest coast and specifically Morecambe Bay. Morecambe Bay is one of the UK's most important innovation districts for creative regeneration. The Bay's edge-rich, historically, ecologically and socially deep environment and the broad variety of industries and species that make their home there make it the ideal place to explore a new model of change, similar to Plymouth being, that change being about the climate catastrophe and the social collapse or social difficulties we're all facing. So in this talk, I'm going to describe how Lancaster University are using culture as a way to stimulate, but also regulate the sorts of changes that we're facing today towards better, more human, and more than human futures. An often used metaphor for innovation districts is the coral reef. Stephen Johnson says that cities are, like coral reefs, flourishing in their own way in diversity because of the proximity and density of different kinds of life, structure, job infrastructure that are positioned very close to each other. But cities also exclude a huge portion of the world that sustains them. The natural world, but also heavy industry, agriculture, the things that feed us, and the things that keep our houses lit. Bruno Latour describes these places as the ghost acreages of the places that are like pushed to the edges of our consciousness, but also pushed to the edges of our society and pushed to the edges of our country even. Morecambe Bay is, of course, one big edge, a shifting, seeping line where human and more than human territories meet each other. And like a coral reef, this single edge is home to innumerable other kinds of overlaps and meetings, and this is the kind of richness, the rich territory for culture to work in and through. And indeed, like our history in Morecambe Bay is based a lot, our heritage is based a lot around Ruskin and sort of like how he was inspired to think of art and science together by the bay, but also Wordsworth famously sort of being inspired by the spiritual connections of the environment. So today, these kind of like overlaps of different kinds of territory, different ways of seeing the bay, combine with hypertourism, housing crises, energy transition, agri-tech, and these, and actually the fundamentally unstable nature of the coastline are kind of making for a really rich place where innovation can happen and where it really has to happen. And culture operates really, really differently along this 120 miles of coastline than it does in a city, even though we've got small cities within that district. And so we're working in a seasonal way with festivals that will sprout up that are very place-based, but also arts organisations like Grisdale Arts, who are like the home for the useful art movement, but also a vision for rural art and like what that actually means and how important that's been to like art history in the UK. Why this is important right now is that Morecambe Bay is facing a generational transformation, as well as the sorts of things that are happening around the country. We have the future of regenerative tourism coming in the form of Eden Morecambe, but also like huge infrastructural investments, whether that's in defence, in Barrow, in energy further up the coast, or in information with a huge data cable landing just down the coast from us in Blackpool with Silicon Sands. How can culture be equal to this kind of moment and these levels of investment and these levels of change? One of the things that we've been doing at Lancaster is working with art to understand how art does two things, essentially, and work with culture for doing two things. One of those things is to shift belief, shift like presently existing opinions and like kind of unsettle people. And the other one is almost its opposite, and that is to structure what has been unsettled and structure things that are unpredictable and seem unsettling to people. And there's an image here of a project that I run called Unsecurities Lab, where we actually use immersive art as a technology for disturbing the views of interdisciplinary groups of scientists, policymakers, and kind of like land engineers in this case, and try to understand these kind of future propositions where things like data and land management have to be thought together in the context of AI, but also with sociologists and ecologists. And we sort of use an immersive art to bring those people together and help them structure their thoughts, structure the kinds of conversations they might be needing to have in the near future to secure our places. What this is doing for me anyway is making a really nice echo between the line of the bay and the way that is a seeping sort of line that connects the human and more than human, and this sort of spine, we call it the spine in the university, which joins up the different disciplines in the university, so the art and culture organisations like Lancaster Arts and the Ruskin, and how that kind of, we can use culture and use the bay as a motif to join up the really world-class thinking happening in the Environment Centre, the Management School, and the Data Institute. And what I'm going to tell you about now is some kind of three projects, essentially, two really well established and one sort of nascent, about like how this kind of like interdisciplinary, really place-based approach to culture in the Bay works, and the sort of fundamental research behind it in the case of Imagination Lancaster. So Imagination is the Design Research Institute at Lancaster, and very recently they had the Beyond Imagination programme, which is funded by Research England, which allowed them to employ 30 new early career academics looking at co-design solutions. And what I love about this project and the colleagues that it's given me is the way that they're sort of like really thinking in more than human ways, but in like entangled ways through technical and ecological and social systems. So there's an image here of Serena Pilastri working with like coastline management, understanding the social dimensions to a changing coastline, floodplains, etc., but also like how to use design infrastructure to manage and help grow wetlands, and a project by Michael Stead where he's working with fixable technologies, repairable technologies. And so this is essentially like a fundamental research base for understanding like the socio, nature and technical challenges that we face and how we can address them. And another project that I've been involved with, which I really might recommend everyone looks at in more detail. I'm not going to be able to go into it in as the right amount of depth here, really, but Morecambe Bay curriculum is a place-based education that runs from early years through to college. And what I loved about this project, I was involved with it. I never thought that I would end up doing digital new media art, immersive art, etc., and like 3D scanning with 3 and 4-year-olds. But it was really amazing to see how they were able to, through the kind of head, heart and hands motif, understanding how they were using the technology to see their space. And just as you were saying, what happens when you're seeing your place anew through a screen, for example, happen there. But also what was noteworthy is that all of the disciplines that were taught through Morecambe Bay curriculum when I was working on it, whether they were the sciences, humanities, history, used culture in order to create that sort of connection with between the subject and like the ideas in the subject and the place for the young people and older young people to understand what actually a place-based curriculum would mean. And the third project, which, as I said, was more nascent, is based on, inspired by these two projects and connected to a lot of activity that we have going on at the university around that idea of culture innovation. And what we're doing with culture innovation, this project Cultivate, is making a concerted effort to make culture, like weave culture in a place-based way through the interdisciplinary cultures at the university. And one experiment that our impact acceleration accounts allowed us to do is to invite scientists and different scholars from across the university, management school, etc., to meet with cultural organisations across the Bay and sort of come up with, devise like sandbox projects that they would want to do. And they had to come up with those projects in a day, and they came up with both the problems and the sort of things they wanted to pilot in that day. And what emerged was these like really, really bizarre, almost coral reef-like diversity of flourishing of projects that you couldn't have invented otherwise. They were sort of like strange enjambments of things that I think really speak to what it means to have like a research-intensive institution doing things in place and the knowledge that they find. So there's a flyer here for a course for young people that was called Finding Your Voice, but actually used cutting-edge technology for linguistics, for like actually looking at a voice. And so my children actually took part in this course and came home talking to me about Walter Benjamin and linguistics at the same time, and like the biology of their throats, which I was amazed by. They would never hear it from me. So, and then there's projects to do with restoration of lost data using AI and walks inspired, like health walks inspired by Wordsworth. So like a real like rich diversity of things that came out of this experiment. And what we're doing now as a result is thinking about how we can use that method that I explained at the start to kind of cultivate the knowledge and the insights that are created when you put art into those contexts, that you shake preconceptions loose, perhaps, but then you also provide a structure for people to talk about like the world that they're facing. We've heard that frequently today, so I'm really glad of. And here's an image of a workshop that we ran based on the artwork of Liz Clough with these worm-like but also listening device-like sculptures that she made. And we used this stage conversation between farmers, agriculturists, ornithologists, and land management people, and trying to like really understand what were the shared issues that we're facing and how they're changing. And so this, for me, is part of addressing also the seasonal quality of like life and culture in the Bay. You see here on the left, there's a diagram of culture that has big spikes and lots of like knowledge and people, resources getting lost after those spikes. And what I really believe, and I've sort of seen that the university can do in this context, is to provide this kind of regulating line to like absorb and use that word again, cultivate the kinds of knowledge and the kinds of information that are produced, and to create a more sort of like virtuous circle, more ecological system. And the most recent project, we've been awarded the Lucia funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council to do this in two specific places on the Bay, connecting Morecambe, which I've already spoken about, and Barrow. So these two places that have got a lot of heavy industry, the nuclear industry or the defence industry in the case of Barrow, but then also this like really brilliant nascent cultural scene that will flourish if we give it the energy and attention that it deserves. And what we're hoping to do after Lucia, and as we sort of continue to connect across the university, is explore these kind of like hyper-local places across the Bay, whether that's the Lake District with Grisdale Arts, Morecambe with Eden, or up into like that energy coast, and sort of like really understand how we can like iterate this model up and down the Bay. And just like the Plymouth talk ended, which I thought was brilliant, was like, this is, and yours is, and ours is, a model for how coasts can do things. And I really think we're like facing shared things, but with different like hyperlocal contexts, different knowledge economies. So it's like, I do think that's really complementary. And this is an image from my collaborators at Deco Publique, who are planning for a Morecambe Bay triennial, which is I really think going to be part of a vehicle for change in our coastal area. Thanks very much.